You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant, and back is a longtime friend, Todd Hassenfelt, just all around a resource for me in the digital and the retail space as a whole for years now, and just super happy to have him back. We were having a conversation around current, I would say, economic trends as a whole, and, we're not economists here. We're not making, no forward-looking predictions or anything like that, or I guess probably there are, but we're not in this space. I guess we're going to say, hey, doom and gloom and everything else and making specific calls, but there are some interesting trends and things that are popping up left and right in a lot of conversations I'm having. And then I just thought it might be a great time to bring Todd on and kind of hash through some of the stuff that he's seen in well. But Todd, you want to jump in, intro yourself? The company, what you're doing, and then we'll kind of dive into the conversation. Sound good?
Sounds great. And thank you for having me and everything BWG does. Love these podcasts. I'm Todd Hassenfelt. I'm with Colgate-Palmolive. I'm on our global digital organization. I work with so many talented people, just a few of them, Lisa Levinsky, Jamie Schwab, Brigitte King, and others. But really trying to figure out from a global digital organization, how do we accelerate our omni-channel perspectives, all things digital shelf, retail media, e-com sales and share, a lot of different topics. Great company to work for. But, again, going back to thanking you, Aaron, the podcasts are always incredible. Thinking back a few of the episodes, I mean, you've had Andrew Lipsman, and he's had his new company now with media ads and commerce. Lauren Levax was awesome, and she has her Digital Shelf Institute in Nashville, April 8th through the 10th coming up. I mean, you've just had an incredible guest list and great topics, and I appreciate you having me on today.
Oh, for sure. I think actually of all those fantastic people, you've got the highest, most listened to episode of all time. So you got quite the network, my friend. You're probably actually we're probably the original person that maybe introduced me to all of them. I should go back and look at that. I'll pour in some emails.
Well, I'm honored. It's all about helping. We're all learning together, right?
It is so true. It is so true. It's weird to think that as long as we've been doing this, maybe a decade or so, that it's only been a decade of all of e-com as a whole, where I think people have really poured in on a corporate basis to learn. And so we've got a long time, and the rate of change is just astonishing. The rate at which new partners are popping up, new tech, the level KPIs, whatever you're doing in this space. Kudos to everybody out there who's staying on top of it, because it's incredibly hard. So the topic to dive into, and I'll go to, is interesting because a lot of conversations I have right now are around profitability. A lot of conversations I'm having right now are around what's it going to look like in 2024. And I know we're in month 3 here, but a lot of people are still scratching their heads because last year it seemed like we were going to hit the soft landing, right? We're first going to have a recession, and then there's going to be a soft landing. But I don't know if that ever took place. And it's like people kept spending money they didn't have. And so you had a bunch of people who put in, I got to hit my, their annual goal. They tried to pull it back because they thought something was coming. Then they beat the goal. But now they're realizing in 2024 that everything might come to a head. And they're trying to explain that to executive teams like, no, this is the year it's going to hit. And the executive teams are like, well, you said that last year and you beat it. So how about you beat it this year too? And then that on top of just, some of the articles we've been talking about kind of point towards the fact that maybe things are going to slow down. But I'll kind of kick off the conversation there. Would love to hear some of your thoughts in this space.
Yeah. And again, I am not, you're not, we're not economists. It's not going to be that level of depth and detail. But if you do think about this from a consumer lens, and then if you're at a brand or in digital or trying to sell to people, I think this matters. And where, does the soft landing has it passed already? Is it coming? We don't know. But I think the data points, you referenced a couple articles that we were sharing, but one of them that's been consistent over this whole time of talking is the consumer credit card debt. And every time that report comes out, it is a new high, and that's not good. But the most recent one that came out here in early March was saying now the credit card interest debt is almost at the same level as mortgage interest debt. And you just get the numbers right here. We are talking $578 billion. That's with a B. It's never been this close. It's never been that high, but even being this close, credit card interest debt and mortgage interest debt since the 70s, over 50 years ago. So you see that, and whether you're an economist or not, that has to be a little bit of alarming. And part of it, we know there's a lot of, educational, the college, tuition debt. And I think probably, prices with inflation, you usually think, well, we'll get through this, right? The prices will come back down on my food bill or whatever it may be. And that hasn't happened. And now are people kind of at the point of, obviously been putting this on my credit card more and more, thinking I'll get to a good spot. When is that good spot coming? And again, hopefully it does come, and we're not predicting like, doom and gloom. But I think when you see these type of numbers, and then you add, even not as much on the consumer, but what's going on with like commercial real estate, and that as well is incredibly high. Just looking at the stat here, that 20% of commercial real estate debt comes due this year, 2024. And so it's just like, how will those problems be solved? But as a brand person thinking at it as consumer, what can you do? But just curious, when you hear those numbers, they feel startling. I'm not trying to like be alert or like, too provocative, but those are interesting headlines.
And what you look like, a lot of people are like, well, are they real? Like, how do we even get here? We've been following this trend, like, right after the pandemic, we get into the pandemic, I should say, and we're rolling, and people start spending money, right? First, they're saving because they have nothing to spend it on, not even travel or anything. They're getting stimulus checks, and they actually go from the highest level of savings ever. And then as stimulus payments start to wear off, they've gotten into this trend of spending money. And everybody was spending it so fast that they blew through all of that savings. And I think that's where people thought, as they hit the 0% on the break even on savings back to where they were, they thought, well, people will stop spending. But people, when you're consuming at a certain pace, whether it's dining out or clothes or whatever, you keep spending. They enjoy spending at that rate. And I think that just carried through, where now they're at this point where they've spent so much, but at some point in time, you've maxed out your credit cards. You're just making minimum payments. You can't go any further in the debt. And that's the part it seems like we might be finally getting to. In that case, it's going to, a couple of things I think is that it will just curb slowly. I think it will slow down. That's what I'm hearing from a ton of brands is it's not been it's just soft right now. It hasn't been a steep cliff, but things are getting softer, and they necessarily weren't expecting it to get softer. And I think that just carries on. And that then begs the question, what do brands do? Because I think you have to have a plan in place for when we've seen this happen. It's March now. When we see this happen through April and May, strategically, you're going to have to change what's going on and what you're doing, whether it's product design, whether it's paid media, whether it's metrics. There's going to have to be something that adjusts, because I don't want to see like, again, doom and gloom, but
right,
we should adjust.
Yeah, and just one thing on the consumer lens, and listen, not right or wrong, but part of this has happened because, one, it's been easier to have your credit card on file already. You don't have to enter in your information all the time. You have buy now, pay later. It's just easier to buy things, not to mention, maybe this will help with making people believe in digitally influenced sales, but you can be shopping all the time. If your phone is in your hand, or you're watching TV and a connected TV ad comes up with a QR code, you don't have to wait to go to the store now to buy that potentially, right? The opportunity to buy on credit is so much more frequent and easier. I can't quantify it, but I have to think that's contributing to this, right? And again, how does it reverse? But yes, you know, to your point, now as a brand, as a company looking at this, how do you adjust? If we break it down, like, and there's more departments, obviously, but if we just look at like e-com sales and marketing and put that with whatever groups, and some of these may blend and they blur like they always do. But so, okay, you see this, you read the headlines, you hope obviously we're going to come out of it, but right now it probably is impacting people, and it is impacting different too on what they decide to splurge on or not. There's not one category necessarily. For one person, it could be, I'm going to buy nice clothes still, but not other things. And for others, it could be commodities or whatever it may be. But I think like from an e-commerce perspective, that whole subscribe and save thing and all those initiatives, or auto ship or messaging, or maybe some funding towards it, trying to lock in a consumer while providing them a discount, make their life a little bit easier. Like, not that people haven't focused on it, but really maybe put a little bit closer look, maybe create some content around subscribe and save, or negotiate different things with the retailer for us. So I think, one, if you're like an e-com team, subscribe and save. Retail media wise, right? Retail media is big in topic, a lot of spend there. But how do you get a little bit more granular and specific now, looking at your retailers? How you're going to allocate money is already a tough decision for brands. But maybe now you look at in your categories, where is there a lot of private label where there's a chance to trade down, and or where is there the largest price gap? And then you make your decision. Do you put more money in those, or do you pull back? That each brand will make their own decision on that. But kind of rack and stack it and look at it from that lens to see, well, how competitive is it? Where do I have less private label, or not as bad of a price gap per se, so I can make my adjustments there. And then your content, from an e-com team, it really there's two kinds of content. We'll talk about the marketing piece in a second, but your attributes, what are people really searching, right? Is it best value? Is it cheapest? Is it, whatever? Is there a change there because of the economic situation? And do you have that built in, whether it's your hidden keywords, whether it's in your copy and how you're setting up things or have to reset up? So I think from the e-com, those are just a few of them. I can go through marketing and sales next, but anything you want to talk on the e-com piece?
Yeah, I think we can, as anybody in digital, again, we're going to have to up our game. I think we had this interesting time, in March, 4 years ago, right? March 2020, the pandemic hits, and, everybody goes digital, and anybody could win, right? Literally anybody could win because everybody's shopping online. And so we went through this weird phase of, it seemed like it was super easy. Now we're on the backside of it. And I should say, you and I have been in it for a while. We know how hard it is. And then there's all these brands popping up everywhere that are just growing. Now, profitability or not, that's to be debated, but everybody was growing, right? It was a growth at all costs. But now we're at a point where you have to get very, very tactical, like you were saying, and very, very strategic around all the different parts, including, we were talking about content, going in and touching content and going in and looking, how has the consumer behavior shifted, right? Because even if you've been targeting the same consumer for the past 2 years, and they've been clicking on your ads for the past 2 years, everything may be shifting with that person. And you're going to have to stay on top of what your actual customer demographic is doing, and being willing to go in and touch all the content that you have that's addressing it, so that you can stay on top of where they're at and where they're moving as they get into a part where they're slowing down overall spend. But that then also flips into the retail media piece. If you don't have that right content, if it's disjointed, right, around what your media, the PPC, the DSP, whatever you're running, what's said on that and what's it correlating back to on the actual detail page, those things need to align. They can't be incongruent. I guess technically they could be, but you're going to get a lower conversion rate. You're going to have to optimize all of that as well. It's,
well, and even
we're at digital 3.0 now, right? That's
even in retail media, if you're not doing this already, but you have to think about, all right, for your non-branded keywords, especially, if you have multiple sizes, which one are you showing? If you're showing your highest price item or your biggest one, you're probably not grabbing that new to brand consumer, right? You have to make sure that your price, or even on keywords, is your price per ounce or whatever you're going to measure is, right? Is it in line with what the competition is, right? So you don't look like the highest one out there per se, right? And or even your messaging, how do you reevaluate the messaging if it's sponsored brand or a sponsored video, whatever it may be, your retargeting piece? Like you have to think about all this because and you talked about at the beginning, right, about how things changing so fast. As an e-com person, this is always the case, but especially now, how do you get your organization to make smart, faster decisions? Because this is going to be about iterations. You're not hitting a home run and figuring it out all in one shot here. This is a whole bunch of singles, most likely with a couple doubles in between, right? But like you have to iterate and adjust in real time. And I think that's a challenge, for a lot of brands is making those changes because a lot of it is not guaranteed, right? It's you don't have all the data points to say, yes, this is the obvious decision, but how do you iterate? How do you fail fast and make those smart decisions faster?
Yeah, it's the old better, not best, right? Like, can we just be a little better tomorrow? We don't have to be the best tomorrow. We just have to be better than we were today. So that better, don't get caught up in making sure everything is absolutely perfect before you test and learn on it. Because you're right, you won't have enough time. By the time you get to putting all the plans and all the approvals and everything's been in place on this grandiose strategy, we're going to be 3 months down the road and everything's going to have changed. So, but how do you stay? The tough part, especially in larger organizations, is being able to do that, right? And that's where we see all these little brands that pop up all the time, right? And all of a sudden they're destroying it. They're just kicking butt, taking names because they can make those quick, fast decisions. Like, how does a big organization do it? I guess is.
Yeah, if let's say you're on the e-com team and you're responsible for this, I think it's awareness and acceptance, and those are two big things. You have to find a way of getting to people, the decision makers, maybe those not as close, right? One, make them aware. So if it is a competitive comparison, if it is a change in traffic, right? If you use like a tool like SimilarWeb and say, hey, this retailer site used to have this average of traffic. Now it's declined because our category, they're going to Temu or Temu, tomato, right? But, this has shifted. Or look at the content differences here. Or we notice this brand is, our share of voice now. These smaller brands are actually gaining a greater share of voice. It's not who we think is our competitor. I think you have to, one, make, the people aware of it in a way, though, that's also bite size, and you can't come with all 5 or 10 opportunities at one time. You have to get them to accept it and almost say, hey, what's the cost of doing nothing? Here's what's going on, right? Like if we're losing share, if you're losing revenue or whatever it may be. But that's not easy to do, but it is constant. It's like corporate telemarketing, right? You're going to get a lot of no's and nope, that's not right, but you have to be persistent and resilient. But I think e-com people do have to step up. We all have to step up our game on the storytelling aspect of it. And it has to be real fast. People don't have time. They don't have time for a long deck. They don't have time for a long meeting. It may be a hallway conversation. It may be a quick chat on Slack or whatever, but it has to be compelling.
Yeah. And it's funny because I do think that TikTok changed everything. And it's even into the corporate space where, I mean, I'm not saying that people are on TikTok, necessarily to communicate, but that short attention span has made its way into every organization where, like you're saying, you have to fine tune your pitch.
Yes.
You've got 30 seconds. I just laughed when I was at Perigo, went into like a board meeting. We're talking about international expansion. I put together the full deck. And, there's like 18 pages there, and hand it to the CEO. And he looks at it, tears off the cover sheet, looks at the first page, tears off the back page. And that was it. And he's like, you've got 5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, and then, but also, leverage in a different way, right? A different form of social proof. Like leverage your agencies, your SaaS partners, maybe, partners you've brought in since COVID, right? You've invested, like leverage their data sources, leverage their knowledge, leverage their broader perspective, right? Leverage BWG events and everything like that. But in all seriousness, like bring some social proof to it as well. That's relevant to to your organization, depending how that is and what department.
Yeah. I think it's also just growing your network. That's where, one of the interesting things is, we'll do 250 webinars, but the 100 dinners we'll do where there's 25 to 30 people. It shocks me a lot of times where people don't follow up with that networking. Like that is the core group that you need to be bouncing ideas off, because we get so ingrained in the day to day. And what comes up all the time is that executive education piece in the digital space, right? And we've had, I just had Chris Perry on again. Those guys are doing something that's awesome over at First Mover around that executive.
Omnigeddon, right? Omnigeddon.
Yeah, Omnigeddon, right? I love those guys, and that part of networking, knowledge sharing to stay on top of those trends and be able to share and learn, like that is key. That is, I think, something you've done really well, right? Is the networking piece.
Well, I mean, people will gravitate towards those that help them either save time, save money, save energy, right? No matter what the topic, but help people when you don't need help either, right? It is kind of the karma factor, but it will. You build that network, like you're saying. But I think, be like, don't do this on your own. Like, like talk it out, get some ideas, like, see if what you're doing is an outlier, or, oh man, 5 other people are doing it too. Let's figure this out together. So yeah, agree. The network is so important.
Yeah. Do you find people you're talking to, something that comes up just earlier today in a conversation in the home goods space was around pack size, especially in CPG, bundling, kitting. Maybe it's Amazon specific or Walmart specific offerings. Are you seeing that? I'm just thinking of these conversations that have popped up either, one-on-one or at dinners. That's something that's popped up more and more often where they haven't necessarily wanted to touch it before, right? Because it's a pain to bundle.
Yes.
Right. It's okay if you got like a 3PL, like a Da Vinci or somebody who can do it for you. But, if you're trying to do it on your own, I mean, Perigo, we send it outside, right? You want the kit and the bundling. Our packaging floors are not doing it. Would love to, have you explored that spot?
No, I think overall, right, and kind of thinking of the marketing angle of like how you should think about this, going back to the economic, like pack sizes make a difference, and let's talk about the bundling first. It is a pain to do the physical bundles, but maybe now there's a different lens, or maybe there's some shifted funding. But whether it's a physical bundle, or really think about the sites that have the capability of virtual bundles, then, right? Because if you can reframe your same existing packages into a regimen build, right? Like for us, it could be toothpaste, mouthwash, and a toothbrush, right? And you could have snack packs, if you're in the food industry, whatever it may be. If you're in the sports nutrition, it could be creatine, protein powder, and a pre-workout. But if you can do that, whether it's physical or virtual, maybe it is still the same price. Maybe you can have some discount price, but at least it's that to the consumer, maybe it's a better value, right? Somehow, some way you can repurpose it. I think longer term, you could look at, like, yes, from an innovation standpoint, and maybe now this is like from a decision tree standpoint, the market team looks and says, okay, we have a gap here. Like, we're the only one not at this size, or this is what people are trading down or maybe even up to, and we need to fill that gap. So this is the time now to assess it and maybe get some funding and a business case for it. And then depending what category you're in, more like, personal care here, but travel sizes, and not for travel necessarily, but maybe people are just trying to get to the next paycheck, and that's fine. And they just need something. So maybe you relook at your travel size piece and just, is there something there? What, mostly in store or maybe even online, but can you look at that a little bit differently? Because maybe that's all that the people can afford right now, and that's fine. Like, help the consumer out. So I think from all that, yes, packaging is a big deal. And then let's not forget about, why people may return. If you have a particular SKU or set of SKUs that aren't doing well in e-com shipping right now, they're leaking, they're breaking, whatever. It's never good to have that experience. It's really bad when economic times are down, someone orders something and something has spilled all over or broke, and maybe it affects the other shipments in the box as well. That's not a great look for your brand. So maybe now is the time to make those enhancements to your high rate of damage items as well. Just something to think about. Everyone's going to have different strategies here, but again, it's all these iterations to kind of think from the consumer lens.
Yeah, it seemed like for like 2 or 3 months there's a little let up on the digital side where people were trying to catch their breath. And then just as that happens, we've got this new spin coming up. So it was like, I don't know, like winter break. I think about with the kids, and it was just past Christmas, and I had a lot of great conversations as people were popping their head up and they're looking at, okay, I'm going to reevaluate my retail media strategy. I'm looking at it. I guess another thing maybe we talk about is on that retail media side, as I'm just, thinking real time here, getting very specific on the actual products that you're advertising.
Yes.
Because there's new tech platforms out there where you really want to look at the unit by unit economics. Like if you're losing money or you're breaking even on that product, why are you doing it? And it might be okay, right? But a lot of people are just, a sale's a sale and still spending money just crazy just to move the product and looking at the ROAS. I mean, we're at a time now where you have to get very, very strategic on almost a SKU by SKU basis of how you're spending money, and even if you want to do it. And that'll have interesting implications on retail media as a whole. When people start getting that granular and saying, hey, I lose $1 every time one of those goes out the door. Why are we advertising it? Or how much inventory do we have? Let's turn it off.
Well, and also, if you're not negotiating for it already, get SKU level conversion rate data, right? So you can have a better chance of what you're going to spend your retail media dollars on. Prioritize those high converting ones, and the ones that aren't, figure out why, right? So maybe now, talk about content from a marketing perspective. Maybe you have to have more value messaging, right? You maybe don't want to change the price. Maybe you're on the higher end and you're not necessarily going to lower the price, but how do you make the content, whether it's image or copy, worth it now? So the consumer goes, yes, it's worth paying this higher price, even though I know there's lower options. But I think also from, that retail media lens, if you're looking at conversion rate, again, looking at what items are there, especially for, non-branded keywords, putting the right one in there. But, where you're spending too, again, like have these conversations, negotiate, that kind of brings in the sales team from like a JVP potentially as well. But even the offsite piece, and your retargeting. Don't forget about your lapsed users, right? Maybe there's a little bit more efficient spend there. Be more prescriptive on how you're looking at new consumer groups, and like how are you going to target that? And if you're leveraging, maybe this is a great time for some test and learn. So if you haven't dove into connected TV yet, great. How can you leverage your QR codes? But I think overall, thinking about marketing, and this is really, everyone combined, all these different things. If you're talking, even you're thinking of Google search, thinking of connected TV, thinking of your retail media, thinking of your social post, most of them are leading to a product detail page. And if your product detail page isn't funded and focused on, now there's other things that all that spend does too, but that's a real, not efficient use of all that spend to lead them, to a product detail page that may not be compelling, capture their attention or convert them.
Right. Oh, it's funny on the connected TV side is I've had conversations, the commercials that happen, a lot of times for the past few years, they've been handed off to the brand team. Because traditionally that's what it is, right? You're doing automotive ad, right? Hey, look at all these cars, but it's not, and it's, go to your local dealer or something like that. The thing about connected TV and streaming ads is you can get very, very granular and specific. It is performance marketing. And so we're at this weird time right now where there are a bunch of larger brands that have kicked it over and they're not seeing a conversion and they're pulling out. And we have smaller brands that are jumping in. They're doing exactly what you're talking about. Drive it to a detail page. It can be on Amazon. It can actually be on your direct to consumer site. Drive them somewhere because you're getting hyper focus and hyper targeting. Get them to that product page and allow them to buy it, as opposed to taking them to a brand store, right? And if you're going to have them go to your direct to consumer site, don't have them land on the main landing page. Have them land on that product page, because it's performance marketing.
Yeah,
and it should be gauged that way. There's
yeah, and think about where they're coming from too, because you could use a brand store, even though if you have it's a mountain biker, let's say, right, and you're a whole biking company, but you have a mountain biking page. Then great, then home, you're like on, whether it's an Amazon brand store page or D2C, another site, whatever it may be. But yeah, I mean, think about where they're coming from too. Like, I won't mention the brand, but I just had an experience where they had a great social post, really compelling. Clicked on it, and it just took me to their homepage. I searched for what they talked about, and it was nowhere to be found on their D2C site.
Yep.
And I mean, that's bad. Like you just lost that opportunity, right? And us as brands, we can't miss those type of that stuff we should all be thinking about and should all be connected.
Yeah, which in that case, right, the interaction, the page views, the impressions, the click-through rate, all of those metrics say this is amazing, right, from an ad standpoint. But then if you don't have the sales conversion on the other side,
yes,
right,
you have to look a little bit deeper, because I've always said there's good impressions and bad impressions. Do we have that broken out?
Yeah,
that's your conversion rate, right, in essence, to a degree. But yeah, but even from a sales team lens, right? We've talked about like JVPs to a degree. I think whatever is best for your company and how we can negotiate with what you need. But I think and I used to do this in my brick and mortar days, and this is for brick and mortar, but maybe you can figure out something online. If you have a product that pairs well with your retailer that you're negotiating with, one of their private label ones, that's not something you have. So like back in the day, if we had paper towels, we did the private label window, the window cleaner. And you can get sometimes off shelf end caps a little bit easier, or you get, back in the day it was the circular or whatever. But think about it again, that's probably a good combination for a consumer, but it may help your brand if you're pairing with, the non-compete private label of the retailer you're working with, right? Like you have to get creative sometimes on these things, and that's not like groundbreaking, but you don't see it, as often as you probably should either. Or where is the beta test, right? Everyone's trying to figure out how to be omni-channel, and all these screens, whether they're new or not, or repurposed in different ways, or they're in-store apps. How can you test with them? How can you be one of the beta partners, right? Learn together, and maybe you get something earlier than your competitors, at a lower rate, or at least you learn, even if you have to pay for it, before the prices go up. But now you connect with that consumer in a different way. Like, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? The old adage. But I think, negotiating, from a sales team perspective, you really have to think about this, in a different way, and this year.
Yeah, it's there's no playbook. I think the toughest part, as people jump into digital and executives are brought into it, is that there is no playbook. The playbook is being developed in real time. And the playbook that just got developed was for 2023 and is, now obsolete. Like it just is, because AI and the new tools that are popping out are changing everything so fast, different economic conditions. Brick and mortar, has been around for centuries. And so it had the opportunity where you could have a playbook, and there's new things changing here and there. The digital space is changing so fast. I was just thinking about that when you're talking about testing and learning. You have to be open to testing, and you're going to lose a lot of the time.
Yes, and fail. You will have failures, and that's okay.
Yeah. But yeah, you have to be able to test and learn over and over and over again. And just know that, like, that's where the leaders are going to play. And if you're testing and learning, you're in that leaders bracket. You're at the forefront. And if you're waiting for the playbook to be developed, you will perpetually be behind. That's just the reality.
Well, I mean, I've said this before, right? It's plan for pivots, not perfection. And I think even going back to that, to the data we were talking about earlier. So if things do go, let's say, the wrong way, right? And we have some really tough economic conditions. And we'll just speak US because it's the US data that we have right now, not saying it's not happening elsewhere, but what is your plan to pivot then as a company? Where's so if the revenue is going to be down, whatever, 10, 20% in the US market, where are you going for it? Or how can you try to inch it back again, hit those singles, but you there's not going to be a perfect plan. And like you said, the playbook is erased from the past in some ways. There's still obviously foundational things that still work, and obviously, but plan for pivots because it's going to be another interesting year, right? It always is, but it does seem to be getting faster, which is why that faster, smarter decisions is where e-com teams really can help their companies and leverage your agency and SaaS partners as much as possible to get that support, that kind of social proof per se.
Yeah, for sure. What? So I've been picking your brain for a while. I always like to throw the opportunity as we kind of get to the end. What's any questions for me? Like, again, thanks for jumping on. This has been fantastic as always.
No,
Anything top of mind on your side that maybe I can kind of pull from other brand conversations I'm having?
You have so many great conversations. I just be curious, this economic piece, different changes. There's been a lot of news with aggregators, but just what are you hearing from D2C perspective? Whether it's from big brands or whether it's from digitally native brands, and just what's the latest, right? I know obviously it's been tougher and there's been a lot of change since 2020 and 2021, but what are you hearing on D2C and what people are focused on?
Again, over and over again, is profitability. In the couple of threads there, I've got a lot of people polling direct consumer sites because they're realizing like we're not making money, right? And that has led to, if they have it, I shouldn't say completely, they're kind of pulling the promotion of it. B2B is huge right now on, I'll say the B2B sites, and they are blowing up right now. Everybody's focus is on B2B because they're realizing it costs a lot of money to ship a product across the US. At the same time, those brands that have, products that have a high enough price point where it makes sense, they're seeing a slowdown. And it's just either the products aren't being bought as often, people are stretching it a little bit further, or they're just buying fewer of them. The frequency is down, so everybody's focused on lifetime customer value. So I really like what you're talking about. The subscribe and save, the subscription base is huge. That is a huge, but it costs more than ever to get them to your site. Give them a discount to have you ship it every month. But along with that slowdown is people are looking to international markets and different providers that can kind of basically set over top your direct consumer site. Used to be Flow.io. They were fantastic. They got acquired by Global E, I think, who has an interesting relationship with Shopify as a whole. And so there's that. Like, there's some new people like Open Border who have popped up who can handle a lot of that stuff. So on that side, who can we overlay simply to get us an overseas audience and we can sell more product? I'm trying to think of the other stuff. I mean, direct to consumer side. If we think about Shopify and BigCommerce, who are major players, Commerce Tools, if you're massive, Shopify has made a major pivot since they sold off Deliver. And it's really interesting as we got a lot of new tech popping up and they're all in Shopify first. I love the BigCommerce platform. And the team that's over there and what they're doing is fantastic. But that's been an interesting shift from BigCommerce winning a lot of deals to people jumping over to Shopify now. That's been super interesting. But it's all a numbers game more than ever. It's no longer growth. Like I was saying earlier, there's no longer growth at all costs. It is everybody's looking at the dollars and saying, hey, are we really turning a profit here? And I guess that'll be the last thing as I kind of wrap up is getting in store is more important than it's ever been before. because of the shipping aspect and how much you can sell and the reach and the brand awareness. That's huge. Anybody who's gotten on store shelf in the past year has a huge advantage in the coming years or so.
It's phrase I borrowed, or the acronym SAFA, right? Consumer journey starts anywhere, finishes anywhere. And to your point, I mean, that includes the store overwhelmingly, but you have to think of it that way. Think of the consumer.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I think we went just a minute over here, but again, Todd, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for all you do for the network, all the content you put out on LinkedIn. It's fantastic. Look forward to seeing you at an upcoming event. If not Shop Talk, I won't be at DSI with Lauren. That's one of the ones I really wanted to make it to.
Awesome.
But maybe one of our future events. Yeah. So thanks again, my friend.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate all you do.
Anytime, my friend. With that, we're going to wrap up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks, everybody, for listening in.